afternoon, folks, and welcome back to the Westport and Shelter Cove Railway. Now, it's been a long time since the last update, and a lot has happened. For the first time, there are no unfinished sections. It looks, I won't say done, because no model railroad is ever done, but it's starting to look presentation ready finished, which is a weird thing to think about because I've literally never had a layout reach that point before in all my, however long I've been doing this. Many years of model railroading, I've never had a layout be this done. The first thing you will notice is that the ocean scene is finished. Now, this was probably the most complex scene on the entire layout, so I'll briefly go over how I did it. The water is clear acrylic with 3 layers of gloss Mod Podge on top, with sort of stippled with a brush to give it that sort of wave effect. I'll put some footage in here of how I actually did that. The first layer didn't look that great. I did on a test piece earlier. I discovered that 3 layers was the minimum to get the look I was looking for. So that's what I did, 3 layers, and I think it turned out pretty good. It has almost no actual depth to it. There's only about 1 millimeter of actual depth to this water, but I think it gives the illusion of much more depth than it actually has. The seawall over here is a rubber product from Chooch Enterprises, which unfortunately you can't get anymore because Chooch went out of business. Now, it was originally a different color. It was sort of a light brown. I didn't like that. It didn't match the scene, so I painted it gray and did some weathering on it, some washes, and some dry brushing to make it look more like those rock seawalls that you see in harbors, and I think it turned out well. The breakwater is made of Woodland Scenic's talus. Now, I don't know exactly what this stuff is. It looks like rock. It's not actual rock. It's very lightweight. It is a little bit expensive for what it is, but I work at a hobby shop, so I got a good deal on it. Anyway, it's glued in place 1 stone at a time with white glue. I did that before I put down the ocean so I could push the Mod Podge right up to the edge of it, and I think that gives a good impression of the rocks extending down into the water. I used 2 different sizes, coarse down at the bottom and extra coarse up toward the top to simulate the smaller rocks that tend to fall down toward the water line. Over here, I brought the rocks almost all the way up to the lighthouse. I did have to re-weather the base of the lighthouse to match the color of the rocks. It was too dark and too bluish before, but I think it's a reasonably close match now, and the whole scene fits together very, very nicely. One other detail in the harbor is this little anchor. It wouldn't be a small town seaside scene without an anchor on display somewhere. This is actually a model boat part. It's from Billing Boats. I just painted and weathered it to look like it was all rusty and glued it in place. Of course, we have to talk about the boat, or rather, the Bad Wolf. Doctor Who reference. You'll notice I also have a TARDIS over here. I'm a big Whovian. I'm also a big Trekkie. I'm trying to think of a good way to put some kind of Star Trek reference onto this layout. Maybe if I ever put figures on the layout, I should have Kirk, Spock, and McCoy wandering around like they're in a time travel episode or something. Anyway, the boat. It's a Walther's fishing boat kit, and it's a really nice little kit. It does have a lot of little fiddly parts. The only part I actually painted was the life preservers. The rest of it I just matte clear coated and weathered the crap out of. Boats get dirty, so heavy weathering is good. I used a series of various brown washes just made out of whatever paint I had lying around. And honestly, I still think it looks a little bit clean for a fishing boat, but this whole town looks a little bit clean for a seaside town, so the overall look is fine, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. Speaking of the town, you may have noticed the buildings. These are Walther's Instant buildings. They're 2-dimensional, printed on paper, and mounted to a very stiff cardboard backing. Now, I made these removable so that if I ever have to move this section of layout, as I did while installing them, I won't mess up the buildings. So these are actually bamboo barbecue skewers, and they go into little bits of styrene tubing back there that happen to be the right size. I'll put some footage in here of this with the layout section pulled out when I was installing it, so you get a better view of that. Unfortunately, having all these buildings here does sort of make it obvious that the cars are a bit oversized. These are Matchbox, Hot Wheels, various other brands of the same general size. Most of them are closer to 1:64 scale than they are to HO, which is 1:87. This one is the closest at 1:72. I measure them with the wheelbase. So some of these 2 are Hot Wheels. That I think is a Matchbox. That's Majorette. These 2 are a knockoff brand from the dollar store. They're a little bit less detailed, but they were cheap, so I can't really complain. The drive-in parking lot is in place. It is gravel. This is Woodland Scenic's fine ballast. And I made a little path over here, a little road entrance that goes across the track. And there's also a little path over here that crosses the track and goes to the lighthouse. So the lighthouse keeper can park at the drive-in and then walk over there. You may also notice the track is weathered. I finally got around to that. This is just a very thick wash of dark brown paint Pretty sloppy technique, nothing really fancy. I just kind of splodged it on with a brush, but I think it turned out good. I think it gives the impression of weathered track that's been used a lot. You may also notice there are no longer big unballasted sections of track here. I used to have a full 9-inch section bridging each gap across the layout sections. I decided that didn't look good, so I cut those pieces in half and ballasted them permanently in place. And then now I just have rail joiners that can slide off onto one section when I take the layout sections apart and then slide back. So the rail joiners essentially just serve the function that the bridging pieces did before, and it's a much more elegant solution to the problem. Over here, the turntable looks pretty much like it did before, but it is now functional. I have a little control panel down here. I installed the rotary switch. That selects which stall power goes to. This turns on and off stall power for the whole system, and this controls the turntable itself. And then that rotates. This is an Atlas turntable, so it has that mechanical thing underneath that lines it up with each stall every time. It doesn't do a perfect job. As you can see, the rail alignment is not perfect. It's usually close enough. Sometimes you gotta jimmy it back and forth a little bit to get it to line up quite right, but it's all part of the charm of the thing. The best way to demonstrate how this works would actually be to turn a locomotive around on it. So let's bring the train around. Now, unfortunately, the Tech 4 died, so I'm using an old Spectrum Magnum controller that I got very cheaply from the shop because it was broken. I fixed it, so I got a good deal. Obviously, this is not the same locomotive that was in the intro to this video, and the reason for that is I filmed that yesterday and I didn't pay any attention to continuity. So, park it here, flip that switch, uncouple these using the sharpened chopstick method, make sure this is off so that nothing else runs away, and we can now run the locomotive onto the turntable. So what I'm gonna do is just turn it to this stall and park it here in stall number 1. These are labeled. Select number 1 on the rotary switch, stall power on. Now let's say we'd like to run a different locomotive. For instance, this Spectrum 440 that I bought on eBay a while back and still have not gotten around to painting. So, turn the turntable to line up with stall number 5. So we should now be able to turn this to stall number 5 and move the engine forward onto the turntable. Now we're gonna have to turn this almost all the way around, so I usually choose whichever direction gives it the shortest amount of distance to turn. We can now back the engine off the turntable. And couple up to the train. Flip that switch, change direction, and we are off. Anyway, folks, that is about it for this update. I think I've covered all the stuff that I've done recently. I'm filming this on my phone. You may have noticed the quality is not quite as good as it usually is because I got some sand in my normal camera while I was filming an RC video for BC Shaver, and it is not looking good. It caused quite a bit of internal damage, I think. The zoom isn't working properly, the focus isn't working properly. It's possible that I may have to start shopping for a new camera, which is unfortunate. I'm not sure my current one can be fixed. For now, I guess I'll be filming on my phone for a while. Alright folks, that wraps up this Westport and Shelter Cove update. These videos are going to have to be a slightly different format going forwards because I'm not going to be making major visual changes to the layout. It's just going to be little bits and pieces. So I may not do updates quite as often from here on out. I may start doing just some running videos, sort of like those videos I used to do with RC cars where it would just be footage and music. Maybe I'll do something like that. I've had people ask me if I was going to do that, so maybe I will. Also, I'm going to do something new on the channel. I'm going to open up comments on this video only and see how it goes. I have not had comments enabled before because I didn't feel like moderating them, but I've had several people ask for it, so I'm going to do it as a social experiment and see how it goes. And if there's any trouble, I'll just shut them down again. And if they go well, then maybe I'll put them up on future videos. Who knows? Anyway, see you next time.